The systematic destruction of the American way of life is happening, with the middle class being significantly impacted. In the past, a single, well-paying job could support a middle-class lifestyle, but that is no longer the case. Decades of accumulated national debt, outsourcing of jobs, and politicians disregarding the country's long-term future have led to an unprecedented dependence on government assistance. This leaves millions of Americans in a vulnerable position as the next economic recession approaches. Here now are 20 signs that American families are being economically destroyed. 20. Rents continue to skyrocket all across America, putting a significant financial strain on millions of American households. Today, a worker must earn about $20.40 an hour to afford a modest one-bedroom rental, which is out of reach for many low-income individuals and families. The median wage in the U.S. is about $21 an hour, suggesting that a significant portion of the population is struggling to keep up with the rising cost of housing. This disparity is particularly pronounced for the lowest-earning 10% of Americans who earn an average of $11.17 an hour. For this group, the financial burden of housing is staggering. They would need to spend approximately 55% of their income to pay for a one-bedroom rental, leaving little room in their budgets for other essential expenses such as food, transportation, and healthcare. This situation highlights the growing affordability crisis in the United States, where the cost of living, particularly in urban and suburban areas, is outpacing the earnings of a significant portion of the population. The lack of affordable housing not only impacts individuals and families directly, but also has far-reaching consequences for communities and the economy as a whole. When a significant portion of the population is devoting a disproportionate amount of their income to housing, it reduces their ability to participate in other economic activities, such as spending on goods and services, saving for the future, or investing in their own education and development. This crisis also exacerbates existing inequalities and disproportionately affects marginalized communities such as low-income households, racial minorities, and individuals with disabilities. Finding solutions to the affordable housing crisis requires a multifaceted approach involving government policies, private sector initiatives, and community-based efforts to increase the supply of affordable housing units and ensure that all Americans have access to safe, decent, and affordable homes. 19. The rising cost of food has become a significant concern for many households across the United States. In 2008, a pound of ground beef used to cost a relatively affordable $2.40. However, in 2024, the cost of a pound of ground beef has skyrocketed to an astounding $4.60, representing a staggering 91% increase over the past 14 years. This trend is not limited to just ground beef, as the prices of various food items have seen substantial hikes. Last month alone, prices for fats and oils went up by 15% compared to a year ago, indicating the pervasive nature of this inflationary pressure. The cost of flour has risen by 14%, while milk prices have increased by 13%. Even eggs, fish, and seafood have surged in price by 11%, making it more challenging for families to maintain a balanced and nutritious diet. The price hikes extend beyond just raw ingredients. Cereal and processed fruits and vegetables have increased in price by at least 10%, while bakery products went up by 9%. Sweets, once a treat, have jumped in price by 8%. Dairy products, a staple in many households, have risen by 7%, and even baby food has seen an alarming 11% increase. The impact of these price increases is particularly felt by low-income families who may struggle to afford the essentials. This is compounded by the fact that the cost of other necessary expenses, such as housing and transportation, have also been on the rise. 18. The burden of rising costs is not limited to food, as the cost of childcare has also become a significant financial challenge for working families. In 2015, Childcare expenses for working families amounted to 7.2% of all family income. By contrast, this year, average childcare spending amounts to nearly 10% of the average family income, a staggering 40% higher than the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services definition of affordability. This increase in childcare costs places an additional strain on family budgets, making it increasingly difficult for parents to balance the need to work and the cost of providing quality care for their children. The rise in childcare expenses, coupled with the escalating prices of food and other essential goods, has left many families in a precarious financial situation, struggling to make ends meet and provide for their loved ones. 17. In 1995, the typical American household had a net worth of $213,122.62, which represented the total value of their assets minus their liabilities. This net worth figure reflected the financial stability and wealth accumulation of the average American family at that time. However, over the following decades, the economic landscape shifted considerably. By 2021, the net worth of the typical American household had declined significantly to $121,700, a drop of nearly 43% from the 1995 level. This dramatic decline in household net worth can be attributed to a variety of factors, including the Great Recession, rising costs of living, stagnant wages, and increasing debt levels. On the other hand, the average American individual has accumulated a substantial amount of debt, standing at $90,460 as of the latest data. This debt is often comprised of student loans, credit card balances, auto loans, and other forms of borrowing. Additionally, the average American household debt has reached $155,622, reflecting the growing financial burden faced by many families across the country. 16. The concerning state of personal finances is further highlighted by the fact that more than half, or about 51% of Americans have less than 3 months' worth of emergency savings. This means that a significant portion of the population is ill-prepared to handle unexpected financial emergencies such as job loss, medical expenses, or major home repairs. A recent survey from the personal finance website Bankrate revealed that 56% of Americans are unable to cover an unexpected $1,000 bill with their savings, while 25% of Americans say they have no savings at all. This lack of financial resilience leaves many households vulnerable to financial shocks and can have profound implications for their long-term financial well-being. The decline in household net worth, the rising levels of individual and household debt, and the alarmingly low levels of emergency savings paint a concerning picture of the financial landscape for the average American. These trends underscore the need for greater financial education, access to affordable financial products, and policies that promote economic stability and wealth building for all segments of the population. 15. In 2004, the rate of home ownership in the U.S. was 69.2%, reflecting a period of relative economic stability and prosperity. However, in the years that followed, this rate has steadily declined, reaching 65% today. This downward trend can be primarily attributed to the ongoing challenges in housing affordability, which have made it increasingly difficult for prospective home buyers, particularly young adults, to enter the housing market. The factors contributing to this decline in home ownership are multifaceted. The rising costs of housing, driven by factors such as limited housing supply, increased demand, and escalating construction expenses, have priced many potential buyers out of the market. Meanwhile, stagnant wage growth and the economic uncertainties stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic have further exacerbated the barriers to home ownership. As a result, the report indicates that 70% of young adults are likely to face greater challenges in buying a home compared to their parents' generation, underscoring the widening gap between housing costs and income levels. 14. The economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has been profound, as evidenced by the closure of a significant number of businesses across the country. According to the Wall Street Journal, 600,000 businesses were forced to shut down in the first year of the health crisis, and an additional 200,000 businesses have been shuttered in 2021. This widespread business closure has had far-reaching consequences, particularly in the retail sector. The report reveals that 3,700 retail chains have announced closures this year, a troubling sign of the ongoing struggles faced by the industry. Industry analysts, such as those from UBS, estimate that this trend may accelerate, with the potential for around 80,000 US stores to close before the end of 2021 and up to 150,000 stores disappearing by 2026. This dramatic shift in the retail landscape underscores the significant disruption and challenges that businesses, especially those in the brick-and-mortar retail sector, have had to navigate during these unprecedented times. The combination of the declining home ownership rate and the widespread business closures highlights the multifaceted economic challenges facing the country. The inability of young adults to access the housing market, coupled with the loss of thousands of businesses and jobs, paints a complex picture of the evolving economic landscape, requiring comprehensive solutions to address these pressing issues. 13. The current economic landscape reveals a concerning trend in the United States, where housing costs have become increasingly burdensome for a significant portion of the population. According to recent data, the average American now spends a staggering $1,784 per month on housing, amounting to approximately $21,409 annually. This figure represents a substantial 35% of their overall income, highlighting the significant financial strain that housing expenses are placing on households. Moreover, the situation is even more dire for the poorest 40% of Americans. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that this segment of the population now spends more than 50% of their already limited incomes solely on food and housing. These individuals, who make an average of $14,000 per year, including various government benefits such as food stamps or disability payments, are forced to allocate a disproportionate amount of their resources to meet their basic needs. In fact, this group spends more than $25,000, or a staggering 182% of their annual income, on essential expenses like housing, food, and transportation. The strain on the middle class is also palpable. While their average annual income just barely exceeds $54,000, they are spending over $48,000, or 89% of their earnings, to afford basic necessities each year. This leaves little room for savings, investment, or even discretionary spending, further widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots. 12. The escalating housing costs have created a situation where the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour is woefully inadequate to afford a modest two-bedroom rental anywhere in the country. In fact, there is not a single U.S. county where a full-time minimum wage worker can comfortably afford a modest two-bedroom rental, underscoring the dire need for a comprehensive review and adjustment of the minimum wage to better align with the realities of the current housing market. This multifaceted crisis has far-reaching implications both for individual households and the overall economic well-being of the nation. The disproportionate allocation of income to housing and other essential expenses leaves little room for discretionary spending, which in turn stifles economic growth and further exacerbates the cycle of financial instability. As the cost of living continues to outpace wage growth, policymakers and stakeholders must come together to devise innovative solutions that address the underlying causes of this problem and provide relief to those struggling to make ends meet. 11. The recently released data from Debt.com, a leading consumer financial education company, has revealed a troubling trend in the United States. According to the survey, a staggering 50% of Americans now carry medical debt, a significant increase from the 46% recorded just a couple of years ago. The financial burden of healthcare costs has continued to escalate, putting a significant strain on the American workforce. More alarmingly, the study found that more than half, or approximately 57%, of Americans with medical debt owe at least $1,000. This debt is primarily driven by the high costs of diagnostic tests, hospitalizations, and emergency room visits, which have become increasingly common in the face of rising healthcare expenses and the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Alison Sesso, the executive director of RIP Medical Debt, a non-profit organization that purchases consumer debt from healthcare providers or aggregators for pennies on the dollar, the current system is inherently biased against the American worker. Sesso explains that medical debt is a uniquely American problem, a byproduct of the broken financing of our healthcare system. The majority of this debt is borne by individuals who simply do not have the financial means to cover the cost of their medical care. 10. The issue of medical debt is further compounded by the ongoing problem of food insecurity in the United States. Recent data shows that 13.8 million U.S. households experienced food insecurity at some point over the past 2 years. This crisis has disproportionately affected households with children, with 14.8% of such households facing food insecurity last year. Moreover, an estimated 584,000 children in America experienced hunger in 2021, highlighting the dire need for comprehensive solutions to address both healthcare and food security challenges. The confluence of rising medical debt and food insecurity paints a grim picture of the financial challenges facing many American families. As the cost of living continues to escalate, the need for policymakers, healthcare providers, and community organizations to collaborate and develop effective strategies to alleviate these burdens has never been more urgent. The well-being and financial security of millions of Americans hang in the balance. 9. According to the Consumer Expenditures Survey, families living in or near poverty typically devote around 75% of their total expenditures to essential, non-discretionary costs such as food, transportation, rent, utilities, and cell phone service. This leaves them with only about 15% of their budget to spend on other vital needs, like education, childcare, and healthcare. This disproportionately high allocation of funds towards basic living expenses leaves many low-income families with very little financial flexibility, and means that even minor unexpected costs can be incredibly difficult to absorb. 8. The prices of school lunches have been steadily rising across the country, with the average cost now exceeding $3 per meal at many schools over the past 2 years. Unfortunately, this increase has priced millions of students out of being able to afford their school meals. The latest School Nutrition Association Trends report found that 43% of school districts faced an increase in the number of students who could not afford their school meals last year. Nationwide, it is estimated that at least 1.54 million students are currently unable to pay for their school meals. The average meal debt per child is $170,013 per year, and the total national public school meal debt stands at a staggering $262 million annually. This crisis of food insecurity among school children is a significant concern, as proper nutrition is crucial for academic performance, physical development, and overall well-being. 7. As the cost of living continues to rise, with soaring prices for essentials like housing, food, and utilities, many American workers are finding it increasingly difficult to make ends meet. A recent survey has revealed a concerning trend. 2/3 of all workers in the United States are currently living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to cover their basic expenses and save any money for the future. This means that a staggering 7 out of 10 Americans are facing significant financial strain, living from one paycheck to the next without any financial cushion or safety net. The precarious nature of this situation becomes even more evident when considering unexpected expenses, such as medical bills, car repairs, or job loss, which can quickly push these financially vulnerable households into deeper financial distress. The rising costs of essential goods and services, coupled with stagnant wages, have created a perfect storm for many working families. Despite their best efforts, they are finding it increasingly challenging to keep up with the rising cost of living, leading to a constant state of financial insecurity and anxiety. This situation not only affects the individual workers, but also has broader implications for the overall economic stability and well-being of communities across the country. 6. In the United States, the average American faces a significant tax burden that can be quite overwhelming. According to the latest data, the average citizen must dedicate a substantial portion of their annual income to covering various tax obligations, including federal, state, and local levies. To put this into perspective, the average American must work from the very beginning of the year, starting on January 1st, all the way until April 18th, in order to earn enough income to satisfy their total tax liability. This means that for nearly 4.5 months out of the entire year, the average person's efforts are solely devoted to funding government operations and services through their tax contributions. This significant tax burden can place a significant strain on household budgets and personal finances, as individuals must allocate a significant portion of their hard-earned income towards government spending. Many Americans may feel frustrated by the amount of their income that is diverted away from their own personal and family priorities, such as saving for the future, investing, or enjoying discretionary spending. The tax burden faced by the average American is a complex and often contentious issue, with ongoing debates surrounding the appropriate level of taxation, the fairness of the tax system, and the efficiency of government spending. Nonetheless, the reality is that a substantial portion of the average person's time and resources are dedicated to financing the operations of federal, state, and local governments, which can have significant implications for their overall financial well-being and quality of life. 5. The distribution of economic growth over the past 50 years has been highly unequal in the United States. A recent study conducted by economists Austin and Splinter has revealed a stark disparity in income growth between the top 1% of earners and the bottom half of the income distribution. According to the report, pre-tax incomes for the top 1% of earners grew by a staggering 157.1% over the past decade. In stark contrast, incomes for the bottom 50% of the population actually declined when adjusted for inflation. This means that the vast majority of Americans have seen little to no real income growth over the past half-century, even as the economy as a whole has expanded. The findings of this study underscore the growing concentration of wealth and income at the top of the U.S. income distribution. While the economy has continued to grow, the fruits of that growth have disproportionately accrued to a small sliver of the population. This has contributed to rising inequality and a growing sense of economic insecurity and frustration among broad swaths of the American public. 3. According to data collected by Investopedia, about 66% of graduates from public colleges have loans to pay. This means that the majority of students who attend public universities, which are typically more affordable than private institutions, still need to take on significant debt to finance their education. Of those students with loans, roughly 43% are currently behind on their student loan debt repayments. This is a concerning statistic, as it indicates that a substantial portion of borrowers are struggling to keep up with their loan payments. The sheer scale of the student loan debt crisis in the United States is staggering. In total, U.S. college students owe nearly $1.75 trillion in student loan debt, spread out among about 46 million borrowers. To put this figure into perspective, that's about $440 billion more than the total U.S. auto loan debt. This astronomical debt burden has far-reaching consequences, not only for the individual borrowers, but also for the broader economy. The high levels of student loan debt can delay major life milestones for many young adults, such as buying a home, getting married, or starting a family. This can have a ripple effect on the housing market, the labor force, and overall economic growth. Moreover, the burden of student loan repayments can limit the ability of borrowers to save for retirement or make other important financial decisions, potentially exacerbating wealth inequality in the long run. 1. The stark inequality in wealth distribution in the United States has been a topic of growing concern in recent years. The latest data from the Federal Reserve paints a troubling picture of the concentration of wealth at the very top of the income spectrum. According to the Fed's figures, the top 1% of Americans, a group comprising the wealthiest individuals and households in the country, hold a staggering $34.2 trillion in combined net worth. This astronomical sum accounts for a remarkable 30.4% of all household wealth in the United States, underscoring the enormous economic power and influence wielded by this tiny fraction of the population. In stark contrast, the bottom 50% of Americans, a group that encompasses the vast majority of the population, collectively hold just $2.1 trillion in wealth, or a mere 1.9% of the national total. This means that the top 1% of Americans have a net worth that is more than 16 times greater than that of the bottom half of the population. This extreme wealth disparity has far-reaching implications for the overall health and stability of the American economy and society. It points to a troubling trend of wealth concentration, where the rich are getting richer, while the middle class and the poor struggle to make ends meet. This imbalance can lead to a range of social and economic challenges, from diminished social mobility and opportunities for upward progress to the potential for political instability and social unrest. Addressing this wealth gap and ensuring a more equitable distribution of resources will be a critical challenge for policymakers and leaders in the years to come. It will require a multifaceted approach that addresses the underlying drivers of wealth inequality, from tax policies and access to education and healthcare to the regulation of financial markets and the promotion of sustainable economic growth that benefits all segments of society. Have you seen someone dealing with the challenges described here? Have you experienced these difficulties yourself? Millions are going through incredibly hard times, not because they want to, but as victims of our long-term economic decline. The downfall of our system is just beginning, and the next recession will bring widespread financial suffering. As we enter this period, we need much more empathy and compassion than we currently have. The numbers shared are alarming, and they are likely to get significantly worse in the coming months. Everything is falling apart in our nation, and life in America is about to change permanently.